All right. How's it going? My name is Alexei Novitsky, and today I'm here with Mr. Tom Quigley, and we are at Chill Cawfee, and we are doing Looshes Labs episode number 3. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing amazing, Lucius, and glad to have you. And I'm happy that you made it out on this bright Saturday day.
Nice. Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to get in first is how I first met Tom, and what kind of has kept me around him, for almost 10 years at this point, something like that. And I think it was back in 2013. I was doing an art show, and I had just finished publishing the very first book, Your Influence in Space. And I talked to a guy for about 2 hours. And then after that, he said, you know what, I want you to join my new green technology. And we were working on an engine that's powered by water. So you pour water into it, and he wanted to show me the main office. And it ends up being a collaborative group that's being hosted by Mr. Tom.
Yeah, so we were down in Ybor City, and we were prepping for the legalization of the cannabis space, but we were looking at everything with alternative energy. We were looking at alternative medicine, wellness as a whole. And we met. He came in raving about you, brought your book, and I think at that time you were actually hand carving skateboards.
I was,
and I think you did one for my son, like right off the bat for his birthday. But the skateboards was a big thing. But the one thing that made an impact on me even at that time 10 years ago was how deep your knowledge was on things that I actually had no understanding about.
Well, we all have different expertise, right? And one thing that I found fascinating was you've had much success when it comes to developing products, releasing them, getting them out to the public. And I think one of your first things was the homies. Is that right?
Yeah. So prior to getting into wellness space, I was a telecom executive. We made prepaid calling cards, and our brand was called the Homies. The Homies was a character group, and they were created by an artist, David Gonzalez, in Oakland, California. And for a period of time, they were actually banned in California. They were illegal. They were told that they were a representation of gang violence, that they were being used as currency inside prisons, and all this kind of nonsense. And after a long period of time, the real story of the Homies came out, which is what David designed it before, which so people would understand that even though we all look a little bit different, we're the same. And, the guy that looked like a gangbanger, he was actually a mentor to children. And, that's when we put together our collaborative. So coming out of the Homies, my previous thing was, I learned a lot by working with David Gonzalez because, I learned that we are all the same. We may all have different bits of knowledge and information, just like what I was mentioning before, but and that's how we came together. And coming out of the Homies brand, I guess the last 10 years I've worked with a lot of people. A lot of people have come, a lot of people have gone, but for some reason, me and Alex, we are always doing something cool together. So it's great. Now we're finally doing a podcast together here.
Yep. I think we did one maybe about 2 years ago. Pretty short-lived, but we did it.
We did during the pandemic.
Exactly.
We were trying a lot of different things, but timing is everything. And things have been a little crazy over the last 10 years, but I think that a lot of new things are coming to light, and I really like what you're doing, Lucius. I like the new content, the new books. When we met, you only had one. Now how many do you have?
9.
Yes, 9 books.
10, I guess, technically.
Well, he's inspired me, and I think we inspire each other.
Yeah.
But thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you've also recently written some books, right?
Yeah. So out of inspiration, while I was in the hospital with my mom, I finished off a few books that I started in 2017. Don't Be Stuck at Startup, which is basically everybody has a startup concept. And I've been talking to tons of entrepreneurs, lots of young minds that have great ideas, but they don't know where to go. So Stuck at Startup has been a trend, not only for myself, but a lot of people. So I wanted to put something out there to help entrepreneurs take that next first step. So I did that. And then I became addicted to the process. I had a lot of time on my hands while in the hospital. And I developed a short series of basically manuals that helps new entrepreneurs basically navigate through the starting of a business and then the next few steps in the beginning, because everybody knows where they want to get to, but they don't know where to start.
I think one of the first books that you had shown me was one that you were working on called Black Belts for Business.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Prior to even homies, or when I was in homies, I was in jujitsu. Me and my wife, Lisa, owned a MMA gym called the XFC. It was in Brandon. It was in 2009, 2010. And being in business my entire life, I started learning martial arts. And one of the things that I learned from martial arts was it was so applicable to business. So I started writing this book in 2010 called Black Belt for Business. And I think when we met with your first book, you were inspiring me, but I never finished it. And then it wound up morphing into corporate to cannabis, which I used a lot of the information that I was trying to translate over into that. But I think over the last 10 years of, working with alternative medicine, learning more about how our minds work and our brains process information and new information, that I've learned a lot about those techniques that are taught through martial arts, not just jujitsu, but all martial arts, and that have been passed down for thousands of generations, maybe even, are really key in maybe helping keep us sane.
I think so. And I think there are a couple different points you just brought up that I wanted to touch on. And well, the one you had, XFC gym, currently you still have a gym. Is that correct?
My partner does. So Chill Cawfee is inside Gracie Brandon. So Robbie D'Onofrio, he opened up Gracie Brandon right after we closed down XFC. Me and him have been really good, probably best friends over the time. I worked with his brother with Florida Cannabis Coalition, Pete. And during the pandemic, we really weren't sure what was going to be going on. And we came up with this concept of combining what we were doing here at Chill Cawfee, which is basically a coffee shop, but it's more of a social. It's a place for people to gather, meet, feel safe, talk about things like cannabinoids or psychedelics, because caffeine is one of the most widely used psychedelics in the world. And we put it together, and it's worked. It works great now. And really what we found that worked from it is not the fact that we sell coffee or that we sell CBD products or the kratom that we provide. It's the space that we provide and the opportunity that we give to either his members or people that are potential members for his gym to get together and talk. And, that's what a coffee shop should be like. And really, when I was working as a consultant, fast forward, that was one of the things that I saw was being lost, even in the cannabis space or in the mental, is the connection to other people. And then the pandemic came and it even got worse. So yeah, the gym with the coffee shop has been a new concept. So you can work out and then hang out in a coffee shop, or work in your car, or watch your kids train.
It's basically the building is cut in half. And so there's a wall right down the middle, and one side of it is a coffee shop, and then it has windows so you can actually watch people training on the other side.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great environment.
And just before we did this podcast, I was over there and I'm working with trainer Oleg, and we're doing a program called Wise Warrior, which is really implementing the things that I was working on in Black Belt for Business over 13, 14 years ago. But it was developed by a woman out of Israel, and it's a mental health therapy program where it takes all of the skills that you may learn through any martial art or technique that you learn, and helps you to understand how maybe you can use it in your everyday life.
That's very cool. So that's now a boxing program that's being done at the jiu-jitsu school. Is that
correct? It's called Wise Warrior, and there'll be a lot more information about that in the future. But what's really cool is how this last 10 years of everything that I've done, at one point I was thinking I was a failure because I had a lot of failed projects over the last 10 years, or a lot of the people that I worked with, it didn't work out. But in reality, it's all led to, I think, a new understanding of what I have now, which is that we're all the same, and that's why, I think it was about 6-7 months ago when I sat down with you, and I was so excited because I was like, the stuff you've been talking to me about for 10 years finally makes sense. So, I know we're talking a lot about me, but, I'd like to get into, how that makes sense. And, because I think the people out there that watch your show, they understand what you're talking about to a degree, but it's deep, brother. It's deep.
It goes deep down the rabbit hole of ultimately creation at the end of the day. But that's why I really like the boxing program that's going on right now. where basically you're translating, rooting and footing and striking and all kinds of different things to different aspects of your life. And that is one of the focuses in the books. I talk about how if you're off balance, how you're going to have power in your punch or in your kick. Same with starting a business. If you're off in a spiritual state or in a mental state, how is your business going to survive?
Yeah.
Right. So you need to find that perfect center in order to finally move forward and have something last.
And it's funny because when we met, you were teaching martial arts for children. And that's really where your skateboard came around, and your initial books, Ollie the Skate Case, and, being able to communicate through martial arts, because it is such a great learning tool. And one of the things that, I've been explored everything from cannabis to psychedelics to martial arts, is that we have to, all of these things bring us to a point of singularity where we're able to learn better.
Yep. Well, that's something I don't think many of my viewers actually know, is that I used to be a martial arts instructor when I was first started doing all my work. And I happened to invent a skateboard that what became super popular.
Hold on, I think I got one here. Keep talking.
Okay.
I'm gonna go grab it.
He has one of the newer models, so he's gonna go grab that. But basically, I was an after-school martial arts instructor, and so I would pick up kids from different schools, 5 different schools, and then I would help them with their homework, teach them Taekwondo class, and so basically I ended up traveling, giving a lot of lectures on innovation and creativity, and so we turned my skateboard into a cartoon character that would go on adventures with me. And here's one of the skateboards right here. This was one I actually painted for Chill Cawfee a few years back at this point. But they're the only boards you can open, put your personal stuff inside. So you can open this up, put stuff inside it. And I think they're a lot of fun. Now we have the electric model though.
Absolutely. But it's amazing how full circle it's all come.
Oh yeah.
Which is great.
Well, and if it's part of who you truly are, it will stay with you and become more and more developed as time goes on. So it's not like I even have to try to continue to develop it. And sometimes I wish it wasn't, I could move forward, but it's part of who I am.
Yeah.
So I just find that interesting. One thing that's going on right now is not to completely shift topics, but to completely shift topics. And I'm not trying to catch you in any questions or anything like that, but what do you think about the modern disclosure movement when it comes to the UFOs?
This has been fascinating, as you know, for me. So we are all seeing what's coming out. I mean, a lot of the things that you've been talking about to me about technology wise, between electromagnetism and the ability to have crafts like this developed, and now we're starting to hear that we have technology, and this is being told to us by some of the highest level military personnel that are in our country. It's extremely interesting. It's actually thrown me into a position where I don't know what to believe in, to be quite honest. I think I sent you a thing that I saw yesterday about Hawaii. Lucius, is this possible?
I was like, and then I was like, I don't think it's real. And you replied back with, no, it was a Falcon.
Correct.
Time lapse.
But because it's so hard to tell what is in the news right now.
Oh, and what I think is, what was I going to say? I just drew a blank. We were just talking about the,
well, with the different information that's coming out about UAPs and UFOs.
I remember what I was going to talk about, and this is going back a few years. I don't know if you remember this conversation we had once before, but you mentioned once when you were working with AT&T that you had a friend that said he discovered time travel.
Yes. So
you remember that?
Okay. I do remember that. Yeah. So it was actually, I was at ArcView. There was a guy that was developing a device that used vibrations, and he was trying to develop this device to travel through time. And what he did find was that plants started growing faster. So theoretically, when I told you about it, you said, well, maybe that device is speeding up time. But he was promoting this to cannabis companies to basically utilize to be able to travel through different portals of time. And, I think that the more we learn about how things work, those things are possible. Yeah. Through science. I mean, so if we want to follow the science.
Yeah. From what I've seen, I do think it's very possible. And, that's kind of where all my work goes. And it does show how potentially through the use of vibrations and creating expanded states of the electromagnetic realm that we're experiencing, you could be perceiving alternate dimensions, alternate moments in time. It's more of the awareness telescope is the way I like to think of it. But so you spent a lot of time in the legalization of medical cannabis for here in Florida, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And so one thing I wanted to help translate to people is that every time there's a big motion, it could even be as, in quotes, as small as a cannabis movement or as big as disclosing hidden technologies and UFOs and aliens. There is always a step-by-step process to get people to a certain understanding. And so could you go over just so people could, because it's always the same and it always relates, could you go over the step-by-step process of the whole legalization of the cannabis? And so people might be able to translate that into the modern.
Where we're at right now, that's a very good point. So cannabis obviously was misunderstood for hundreds of years due to the information that we learned. I grew up in the Reagan years, where drugs were bad and they were all bad, including cannabis. So when I first became, and the reason I got into the cannabis space was as a patient. I had a mass on my pancreas in 2013, and I was searching for ways that I would treat myself. And I didn't trust the doctors anymore because the pills that I was given almost killed me. So I was on opioids from 07 to 2010, created stage 3 liver disease, in turn pancreatitis, in turn misdiagnosis of a pancreatic cancer. Turned out it wasn't cancer, but it put me through the ringer. And when I found out that people were using cannabis to treat cancer, I was in shock. And then I started learning on how much we were misinformed in the past and how families like the DuPont family and that were threatened by the cannabis or the hemp space invading, or the pharmaceutical companies that were creating cures and medications that people would have to purchase, that that natural medicine was, and it's been silenced. And the same thing, it looks like, is going on now, because I've been hearing about Roswell since I was a little kid, right? But it was theories, it was, ooh, there's an alien, it was jokes, it wasn't real, it was, oh, they're crazy out there. And then you start learning, well, wait a minute, this has really been documented by our government. So now, as a 54-year-old, person that grew up his whole life learning one thing and now learning new information. And, I think that comes up, that we all have to be open-minded, that we have to change our belief system. So the same way as a lot of people have changed their belief system about cannabis. So when I first started in 2013, it was very difficult. It was very difficult for people to understand unless they were personally affected by somebody that was being treated. But right now, there's so many people that have benefited from this plant. I feel like a lot of my advocacy work in the cannabis space is no longer needed, because it's reached a point of not saturation, but where more than 50% of our states have legality. We have more consumers understanding it. We have more people using the cannabis plant. We have more people understanding they were lied to all this time about this plant. Not only this, but
and that's just a simple plant in a way. And what I find fascinating was one of the first things you just said was how you were somewhat born into a certain type of thinking, to where cannabis was taboo. The same is true with, you could say, UFOs and aliens and all that kind of stuff right now.
Believing in them. Like, growing up believing in them, you were crazy, right?
100%. And so that's why, just to circle it back to, I guess, the book, one of the things I speak about is how we're all somewhat born into different cultures, and we're born into different thought forms and lines of thinking. And those somewhat limit us in our ability to even make rational decisions at times, or the best decisions, because of stigma that's already existing. And one thing I noticed, so when it comes to the cannabis movement, I became a board member for Central Florida Normal. And we did some pretty outrageous movements. We once put
Yeah, you did.
we created a parade float that got attention from the media outlets. And so what was the point of that motion was to bring everybody from this side all the way over here, so that when they pace back, they might be more towards their perfect center, like the center of truth. By pushing in one direction, you get closer to the truth. And so I always found that the pacing about what the ultimate outcome would be. But another thing, just to kind of go off of how we're all born into this different system to begin with, I was born into you could say, a medicinal family. My dad was a cardiothoracic surgeon and my mom was an anesthesiologist. And so growing up my entire life, you hear, don't touch, cannabis or anything like that. It's bad. Don't touch it. Don't do it. But then I do all this advocacy work, and it turns out there's an entire system called the endocrine system. Endocannabinoids. And if the body doesn't properly have the required amount of endocannabinoids, then it will suffer effects, right?
You'll come out of balance.
You come out of balance. So like a hormonal balance, is that
exactly? And that goes all the way back to you can't throw a punch if you're off balance. You
right? And
can't do anything.
And so one of the main reasons why we don't naturally have those endocannabinoids in our system anymore at this time is because of all the processed foods that are being created and the way that they're being created. Is normally like foods would have those cannabinoids in them.
Certain foods, you would be able to get cannabinoids from plants. So adaptogens are basically plants that have adapted to survive over thousands of years. Cannabis, cannabinoids being such. And, when we consume them, they help our bodies come into balance and survive the stress that we're under. So, and we may have been able to get that from our food supply because cows used to eat hemp hundreds of, and
well, I think the Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper.
Yeah. And the DuPont family saw it as a big threat to their rope industry and their synthetics and so in the newspapers, the Hearst family. So you start seeing that that the narrative was created by individuals or business entities that had a benefit to the masses believing something. Right. So, and that, going back to your original question was, how do I see how it correlates to
exactly the correlations between the two?
Is that, my mind goes, well, if this technology was around in 1950, maybe there's some business entities like Raytheon or, all these different big industrial complexes that we've been warned upon that have secretly taken that technology and they've used it and put out a false narrative to everybody else for all this time so they can protect their advantage, and that's the way it seems to me. If it happened in cannabis, why wouldn't have it happened in this? And how many other things is it going on?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, they, not to be too biblical, but they say that money is somewhat the root of all evil. And when all we do is work for money and we're born into different thought forms or understandings to begin with, it becomes really easy to control narratives and to control people. And so you can make a plant illegal, you can make technologies taboo. If you even talk about it, now you're considered crazy or insane because you said, hey, I saw a UFO. I mean, the government did a great job making anyone that saw it seem like a farmer that doesn't know anything.
Absolutely.
But just to take that one step further, I mean, you could consider the city almost like an ant colony. And so how many ants that live in the colony ever see a grasshopper? Well, they don't, because they haven't traveled outside the colony. And so if you've never actually removed yourself in a mental light of existing within the colony, how are you expected to ever see something that exists beyond it?
And I think somebody had said a small quote to me early on in the cannabis space, which was, you're allowed to change your mind with new information. Just like Socrates, and they lived in the caves in the darkness and saw shadows that they thought were demons. And then once they got out into the light, new information, and we're allowed to, but we've been indoctrinated or we've been, beaten into our belief system to believe a certain thing one way. And even in our store, I talk to seniors all the time that come in and they whisper to me, they're like, I can't do this THC stuff. It's, I always have said I've never done a drug in my life and I don't want to lie to my grandchildren. And it's still in their belief system, even though, but we can give new information. And then as they start learning new information, they can change, the way that they see it. And I see that that's going to happen with UAPs, technology that's out there. And we're going to start being aware that these stories are real, that there's a lot more that we don't know than we do know. And for all we know, we're just like some of the lost civilizations of cannibals that live in the Amazon.
That's actually a really good correlation there. But one thing I wanted to speak on real quick was how you said it's okay to change your mind. Because I mentioned earlier, my father was a cardiothoracic doctor, so he was a heart-lung doctor, and he actually helped with the first heart transplants out in Cape Town, South Africa. And so the entire time for me, it's don't do stuff like that. Don't touch cannabis. Don't do that. But then he ends up because he's an educated person, he ends up learning about the endocannabinoid system, and he's completely has a new job. He is now a medical marijuana doctor. He will prescribe cannabis to people that, need healing and require healing. So I think it's important for people to be flexible, especially if you're a scientist, and you're working at advanced, universities such as Harvard or Stanford, just people like Avi Loeb and Gary Nolan. And it's great to see that they're already creating programs such as the Galileo Project to go research these taboo topics, but in serious light and with serious science.
Yeah.
So I find that fascinating.
I think it is as well. And, it's scary at the same time.
It's traveling into the unknown.
It's totally the unknown, but I think we have to embrace it. And, we have to open up our minds to be able to learn. And, that's what a lot of these different techniques, whether it's the boxing for mental health or, ayahuasca or psychedelics or the mild use of cannabis, allow our brains to get into that mode where we can learn new information, or not just learn it, maybe process it.
Yep.
Because I may have been learning it for a long time, but I never was able to process it because something was blocking that connection from happening.
Exactly. And so when it comes to processing information, and you sit in school all day and someone just tells you information all day, you still need to unpack it and process it, let it reach your subconscious mind and let the learning actually happen. And what I find interesting is you've been recently doing or becoming more involved with the ayahuasca journeys. Would you want to speak on that at all?
Yeah, sure. Like I mentioned, over the last 10 years, worked with all different types of therapies, and I had been sending a lot of veterans for ayahuasca retreats as what I felt like was a last resort for many people, because it's a very extreme thing. It was something I was fearful to do myself. But I got to a point in my life in January after my surgery where I was put on medications when I was in the hospital. I was in there for 10 days and I came out and I wasn't feeling myself. And I decided it was time for me to go, and I went. And ayahuasca is very powerful. It's not for everybody. But what it was able to do was it was able to allow me to stop for a second, stop all the noise that was going on, process what was going on, because pretty much majority of my life I'm like a bull in a china shop. I'll just make things happen and somebody else can clean up the mess, but I make things happen, and that wasn't working anymore.
It seemed like to me the biggest thing that I noticed was like a reset, almost like a reset of mental barriers. So almost like blockades. Or I know for me, I got stuck in a moment where it was because you mentioned earlier, like you felt like you had failed several times at things. Well, if you don't try, then you never fail. But if they build up to the point where you start actually subconsciously thinking, well, I'm a failure or something of that nature, it can become extremely debilitating. Yeah. And so the journeys.
And that was it. I was in the process of writing a book called Loser, and I went there and I came out of it and I realized, I can't identify with losses. Those losses are learning experiences. So if I change my perspective a little bit and I don't look at what I did as a loss, and I looked at it as that I learned something and I process what I learned, then I can accept it more and then maybe let it go. And if I could do those few things, then maybe I could do something else. And, that was the thing. And I changed the book to I Am a King. And I put that out because I wanted to have a way to translate to my family. I really want.
Just real quick, it's the same book though.
Yeah, I started it out as
Loser, right?
And then I rewrote it as I Am a King. And I took out all the negativity and negativity, because I started looking at everything from a different angle.
Yep.
Not from, but I explained why I did it, and how I put into the book, that I'm not alone. A lot of the people that I met on these retreats and that I've been talking to and I go to integration with and I'm learning from, they experience very similar situations.
That's kind of drawing a blank again. I had something there. Let me see if I can get it. It reminds me of when martial arts, when I was teaching kids, because we would say some instructors would be like, no, don't run, don't run, don't run. Meanwhile, others are out there saying, walk. So it's a difference, right? So you could walk around thinking I am a loser, write the same exact book, but with a different title, I Am King. So what are you trying to push out in general to the, I'm just more of not a rhetorical question, not a question. So it's like, what are you pushing out yourself? Are you pushing out negativity? Or are you pushing out positivity? And then it also, I think a lot of my audience will understand this, the law of attraction. And so if you're pushing out things that say, I am a loser, or I fail all the time, or this, well, that's, in my opinion, you get better at anything you practice. And so you will naturally become getting better at being a loser.
I was the best loser for a long time. Not a long time, but honestly, that's how you start feeling. And you're absolutely right. It's all about purposeful talk, and understanding, you do have a subconscious, and you have an inner voice. And you talk about the inner voice, or the fifth dimension, all the time, and our inner voice, and many a man lose that battle to that inner voice. So being able to, become what we call a wise warrior, and that's what the boxing program is about how being able to balance that emotional mind with your rational mind, and coming to this point where, you can have clarity and you can have focus, because the noise is quiet for a little bit.
And then you could actually change the chatter, in quotes, that's going on in your head to that positive result, the one that you're actually successful, the one that makes you like feel good about yourself ultimately. So we had a book signing last weekend over here, and it wasn't like I sold many books or anything like that, or signed many books, but just everyone getting together and the positive energy of everyone getting together. That entire weekend was awesome.
Well, what's amazing is it's so contagious. Lucius inspired me to write my book and finish it, and then I inspired somebody here at the coffee shop to finish a book they were working on, and then another person, and then before I knew it, we had 4 or 5 different authors that all published different books, in different realms. One on an EMP detonation from the military that was,
I like that guy.
Fictional. Joe Sackett.
Yeah.
Joe, you're gonna have to. We're gonna do something for 9/11 here on the 10th, and he just put out the hardcover of his book. And then Erin wrote a book on the spectrum, on autism, and then she also wrote a book for children on how not to worry. But the beautiful thing about it is it was like the butterfly effect. Because if you didn't start and inspire me, and then I was able to inspire, and then we were able to bring it all together. And it's kind of cool to watch. A lot of times we go through life and we're just barreling through, like I said before, and we don't even stop and smell the roses, or whatever. But to be able to look back and say, wow, these are good things, that are coming together, and it's because we're in motion.
And that's one thing that I find fascinating is the butterfly effect that you're speaking on. Just like if I were to walk in here with a grumpy attitude, I can almost guarantee you every single person in this building would become more grumpy by the time I leave. And so that's why one thing that I try to focus on is you see someone's emotional state or state when you first enter the environment, either keep them there or bring them higher. Try not, in my opinion, to keep them higher. I don't even want to speak the negative version.
But and it's hard. We're actually doing a negativity seminar here on September 9th, which is a Saturday. It's a guy that from Mandalay Bay. He used to run these seminars on how to reduce the negativity in your life, because it's all out there. Negativity is everywhere. It's in the news, it's in your friends, it's in your family, and there's nothing we can do to stop it from coming in, but we can change the way we react to it, I guess.
Well,
and then try and, like you just said, make it a goal to not feed it but lift it.
And that's why I think the media is so dangerous, especially when it comes to the politicized media, where you have certain movements going on that they're designed to create fear. They're designed to separate individuals. Good example would be, all trying not to get canceled here, but like a good example would be like the BLM riots, right? I didn't see much unity in that kind of motion or movement. And I very similarly with other movements that are happening right now, it's not like, do you guys ever see a president that you would want to be like? Or as a child, when I was growing up, I always thought that everyone would want to strive to be like the leader of the country. But what I've noticed right now is that I haven't really seen a leader that I would want to strive to be like. And they're all being advertised all over the media. And so it just becomes challenging.
Well, if you want to control a society, you divide and conquer. Okay. So if your enemies are fighting each other, you could do whatever you want. I feel we're all being distracted. We're all being, it doesn't matter if you're red or blue or, Republican or independent or, Using politics and being inundated with it to divide or put divisions between anybody, whether it's families or friends or, because people are digging their heels in too deep without being open and understanding. And if we start realizing we all want the same thing, every one of us really wants the same thing, we can stop being distracted and move towards that instead of trying to move towards proving we're right.
I mean, I think that I totally agree with that. And that's one of the things I speak on in the book, The Physics of Love, Synchronicity. It's that all beings are ultimately, all beings, cats, dogs, humans, mice, any animal, all beings are ultimately striving for love and harmony. And so when you have all these subconscious trainings being propagated to you 24/7, it becomes extremely challenging to have this subconscious harmony if you're being programmed to have subconscious disharmony.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and that's the thing. We talk about it all the time. I think when I first met you, I was like, "Oh, what's your Facebook?" Okay, you're like, "I got rid of Facebook. I threw my phone into a lake." I was like, "What is this guy crazy?" He's younger than me, and he doesn't. I'm on Facebook. I know what I'm doing. I got ads going. I got everything, and I realize now, and I don't have Facebook on my phone now because the notifications and checking it. I got the Instagram, but I told my wife and I told Lucius one of my goals in the next year or 2 years is I want to disconnect. I want to do, whether it's for 3 months, 6 months, a year. And if anybody wants to try and do it with me, it'd be amazing to do. But I think we'll all feel better. I've started doing it. I go home, I leave my phone and my watch at home, and me and Lisa will go out to dinner.
I've noticed sometimes I text them and I get an instant response from some type of app or something. And it's like,
Yeah.
I can't talk now because I'm on focus. It's
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah. So I put the focus app on, and then I also put my phone in my kitchen at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I try not to be connected. And now, because I felt like I was just inundated with stuff, whether it was a new news thing, a text message from somebody, "Hey, did you see this?" Or, "Hey, so-and-so's sick," or nobody wants to send you a text with good news. It's crazy.
Well, not only text, but I like what you just said, the notifications that come up from those types of things. And it's like, well, for example, I get 3 or 4 emails from LinkedIn a day. And they're just the most random things. This person posted that. Well, why do I care about what that person just posted? I mean, is it in my life? Is it really in my day?
Yeah, next door, I get all these updates from that, and I get caught up in it. Oh, so and so's cat got lost.
Right.
It's like, but it really has no impact on my day. And it distracts me. And going back to what we said, if we're distracted, we can't grow. So if we want to get into it, if you want to stay where you're at, it's okay to be distracted. If you want to go backwards, it's okay to be distracted. But if you can eliminate as many distractions from your life in any format, if it takes doing psychedelics to do it, great. If it's exercise, great. Meditation and yoga, great. These are all different things that can help us to get to a point where we can learn more. And then there's a lot to learn up there, I'll tell you that.
And certain things aren't for everyone. For me, I haven't done ayahuasca or anything like that. For me, meditation works great. For other people, it might be what's required for them to help.
And I put that in my book, as for me, I'm therapy resistant individual, from what I've been told. I can't meditate. I'm meditate resistant, but the taking ayahuasca was forced meditation on me. I was forced to meditate for pretty much 12 hours, in different sections and figure things out. I'll figure out the other things about everyone, but figure things out about me. And that was really the first step. And if you notice, a few of the books that I wrote are all about, Sam Sinek and going back to your why, because I think there's so many people out there right now that don't know themselves or why they're doing what they're doing. Even they just are doing it because of the things they're inundated with. They're being told that they should be like this. They're being told they should look like that. They're being told they should do this type of job. They're being told they should hate this type of person, and
those are all trained things from the moment of birth, subconsciously being somewhat beat into you through the social media and through, news and different outlets of that sort.
Yeah.
That's why I just find that so fascinating, the way you said it gave you time to digest the information and basically what I call returning to zero, because from that point of zero, you can actually grow and continue to grow. Right.
Yeah. And, that was one of the things I had a guy the other day calling it PTG, post-traumatic growth.
Right.
So, but, until you deal with it, you can't grow. So you're always going to be stuck in, your stress disorder, so to speak. And I think that, learning about it helps you to organize it. Just like if you got a messy drawer in your bedroom, you organize it, you feel a little bit more clearer headed. And so I'm cleaning my garage out right now and I feel at ease, because it's not as messy. And I think that our brains are just messed up and we're distracted by all this stuff. So my goal is if I could get all that out and then this way, maybe take a year or whatever it is to like go back to real zero, because I did feel like I
Exactly.
got there at this retreat, but then you get back into real life and you get sucked right back into it.
That's the challenge right there. And the one thing I wanted to know too is that when you're doing these ayahuasca journeys, you have professional guides with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I don't recommend anybody do psychedelics on their own, if they're not prepared for it. I was very, very fearful of going. But when I went there was a medic. I went with a back brace on. I had just come out of surgery. I just detoxed off of Ativan, which is basically Xanax, which is one of the medications that I was addicted to back in 2008, which, I never wanted to take again. And all of a sudden I was in the hospital and I was on it again. I didn't even know how it happened. But it's not for everybody, but for me, it kind of was the smack in the face that I needed at that point, because, I've beaten into my head so strongly this new belief system of attaching myself to the results of things that were not working, and those things weren't working. They were out of my control.
Right. I think that's great. The whole returning to zero there. And I'm going to kind of shift gears on us a little bit. I know that, so you've recently written how many books?
7 or 8.
Seven or eight. And from what I found is one of the most interesting books. I haven't read through it fully or anything like that, but just the title alone kind of caught me. And it was Building with ChatGPT, or using AI to help you build.
So one of the things, the way I was able to finish all my books was I used ChatGPT to help me finish them. It did not write my books for me, but what it did do, it allowed me to take things that I had been working on for years, organize them, be able to reference them, and put them into a format that I was able to publish. So for me, I was able to, so one of the things that I thought was that, this is a great tool, but it could be misused. So not only could it help you to do something like write a book, I always go back to branding, because that's really what I was doing before all this. And I still am always a brander or a marketer inside, is how can you build your brand by using ChatGPT as a tool? And that's been one of my more popular books on Amazon. It's been selling the most. I've been having orders from actually all over the world about it. And I think that people are nervous about AI, artificial intelligence. And that's another new thing that we're all learning about. That's been used as a tool by other people, for a long time, that we're just finding out about.
Well, and that's where I think that, just like we were talking earlier about how we get somewhat indoctrinated through the media from the moment of birth to consider certain topics taboo to begin with and not taboo. And now let's take it one step further. Now, before artificial intelligence came out, you could say that Google searches were the modern artificial intelligence, where people they don't have any experience, but they basically type it in Google and then they tell their friends, hey, I know the answer because Google just told me. So not yet, it's important to understand that Google is a tool. It's not always the truth, because it does get fact checked. And so now when we take this to this next level, artificial intelligence, and younger generations growing up with artificial intelligence, I just think it's important for people to understand that it's a tool. Like you said, it's a tool. It's not truth. And that someone wrote the algorithm that's controlling this tool.
Yeah, and my books that I wrote are about the basics, because if you know the basics, then you can use the tool. But if you jump right to just using the tool without knowing the basics, you don't know the truth.
But in order to even know that, to take that one step further, like to remove because people are going to be born into artificial intelligence telling them what to do. So there needs to be a moment of clarity for everyone. I would say almost at the age of 10, go on a retreat, like a camping retreat, and get rid of artificial intelligence and understand that it's just a tool.
Yeah.
It's not the truth. And so that's where I think the biggest concern from artificial intelligence comes, is that people think it's going to end up being like the Terminator movie.
Yeah. Right. Or like a calculator. A calculator. Before we had long math and you'd write it down. And now a lot of people that have grown up with calculators, they don't really know how to add numbers. They forget, or they forgot.
Like I used to do a long math all the time, but now what do? I grab my cell phone and I type in numbers. And when it comes to having a sense of awareness about driving throughout the community, I used to know how to drive from here, Tampa, all the way to Colorado, into California with a piece of paper that says, follow this. This is a map. And now you have the blue line that you just
Oh,
followed.
yeah. You know, it's funny. One of my other customers that he was in earlier, he was talking about how his kids were laughing about. He's like, "Oh, people were so dumb back then when you were a kid." You know, he's like, "Tom, we didn't have GPS. We had to figure out how to get
Yep.
somewhere." It's true. Like if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, come to the house or call after 6, or there's a generation out there that has never answered the phone for somebody else.
So what does that do to the general level of anxiety? Remember how you were talking about something like a distraction. So I guess I'll let you go, and then I kind of want to speak on that a little bit.
Well, I mean, we have it goes back to what you're saying about being born into this, and that now it creates a false sense of reality. And then with that false sense of reality, when you start being made aware of the real circumstances of the real world, or your inadequacies, and then your fears come out, and then that leads to anxiety because you fear the future, because you may not be able to handle it. You may not be able to, solve. So the more confident you are in your skill sets or your abilities, the less anxious you'll be. So the more tools that I found that I've had at my disposal, the more incompetent I may feel. So if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
But the more I can rely on my own skill sets, the more confident I am. Don't worry, I can do that. I can do that. So I'm fearful of the next generations, if they rely on tools only,
Right.
they're going to have a false sense of confidence, and they're not going to really know how to interact.
It doesn't translate well to the first time they ever have a real problem.
Correct.
They won't know how to handle it. Yeah.
Because you don't have a calculator to solve it.
What I was thinking was very similar, but a little bit different. Like, there's all these things that people are doing now. So it's like, you need to return this email. You need to check your Instagram notifications. You need to check your Twitter notifications. Then you get a hater on Twitter. Now you feel bad because that person said some weird stuff. It just adds layers upon layers of layers. And the thing that I think is really important to remember is those are all inventions created by another man. So the things that you really need to live are food, shelter, money, love is one of those as well. And so you don't need to reply to every notification. That's just something I just wanted to throw out there. So, and that's how I think that the anxiety builds with all those different platforms.
It does. And, that's one of the reasons that you got to understand yourself more, understand your habits.
Yep.
So as you start to learn habits, then and then if you know that you have the ability to learn new things, get rid of the ones that don't serve you anymore. But
Definitely.
It's hard if you don't know that these things are preventing you from growth. And you want to grow, because everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to be a little bit better. They want to be a little bit better than they were. But there's roadblocks there, and those roadblocks are really self-imposed.
And that's where it comes down to understanding the subconscious mind, and what I say is what controls the pacing motions of your life. And it starts from the subconscious. And that's where I think that things such as like the ayahuasca can really help people compress, digest the information have been taught for the last 20, 30, however many years, and find that new perfect center and see what was the word you just used? See what actually helps them grow versus see what
Post-growth, yeah. Towards future growth. I mean, as opposed to what doesn't serve them anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because we're all inundated with habits that prevent us from growth, whether they're smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, wasting time watching YouTube on your couch, or playing video games.
If you want,
some of those things could be great decompression or stress relievers, but when they become the majority of your timekeeping and your skill development, you're really not going anywhere.
Well, when it comes to skill development, like I mentioned earlier, you get better at anything you put your mind to. So if you want to watch YouTube videos, you will get better at sitting on your couch watching YouTube videos.
I'm pretty damn good at that.
I've gotten pretty good at it too. I mean, I think that's probably one of my biggest, I get stuck on the shorts. And so how big is a short? Well, it's 1 minute. That's the maximum length of a short. And so when it comes to the line of sight and your ability to make decisions, you're now living within this 1 minute thought process versus living within something that's more connected to a lifetime, something that'll last 10 years, 20 years. And so that's where I think also the anxiety comes in with it, being aware of that stuff.
It is.
Yes.
Well, we're getting pretty deep still.
I think we could get deeper, but I'd say another 5 minutes at most or something like that.
Yeah.
And we'll call it, maybe come back on for a second episode sometime.
No, that sounds amazing. I just I'm amazed, at all the different things that are happening with what's going on with these. I'm watching Sean Ryan. I don't know if you watch his podcast, but he's had some very credible witnesses on there that have testified about, things that they've seen in the military. And, going back to that, I know we got away from it, but this ability to learn new information, I don't know if it's it can be distracting as well, is what I'm getting to. So you could go into a deep rabbit hole trying to figure all this stuff out.
There are a lot of rabbit holes.
There are a lot of rabbit holes. So, one of the things that I try to do is stay focused and task oriented, and then try and learn about this stuff as part of my day, not as all of my day.
Well, and that's the one thing too is I'm kind of big on the Twitter space, or I guess now it's the X space.
Yeah, what is up with that?
That on Elon Musk, he's just doing what he does. And I just find it funny because you'll see a post from a reporter or a journalist, and now that becomes everything that people talk about for the next week.
Mhm.
And I think that's important to understand is you can do what you want, but you'll get better at what you do. And so for me, I'm trying not to get better at getting caught up
And finding like negative information too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. No, the thing
And
that,
people will send it to you. Like I sent that to you because somebody sent it to me.
but I'd already seen it twice.
Yeah.
That's what's so funny is we all end up seeing it because certain things are being pushed and propagated. And the ones that right now that I've noticed have come out, I don't know if you've heard about the Peruvian incident.
Tell me about it.
So over the last 2 weeks or so, there is a tribe in Peru. I wish I knew what city, but it's in the rainforest, and they've claimed that they've been attacked recently. Over let's not get too caught up, but attacked for the last 2 weeks by 8 foot tall gray aliens, and they have these little pads on their feet, and when they shoot at them, basically the bullets don't do anything because they have this silver armor. And they have the ability to levitate and take off and fly away. But then at the same time, it's important to understand that these tribes, they're not dumb people, they're smart people, but they have myths that have been embedded into their training from the moment of birth. Again, kind of like we were talking about, you're born to think certain things.
Yeah.
And so the local miners, I think it is, or what do you call someone who cuts down trees for?
Foresters.
Yeah, local foresters use the myths to scare the locals.
Yeah, because they're running them off their land.
They're running them off their own land by pretending.
Yeah.
That's one of the theories, is that's actually what so the Peruvians called in the Navy to actually do an investigation on this because it was such a big deal over there. And the Navy came back and said it's through your local foresters kind of trying to scare you. So I just think it's important for people to take all sides of it and not get too caught up, because ultimately, what can I do about that living here in Tampa? Nothing. I mean, all I can do is think about it, but it'll be a distraction to goals that I'm trying to accomplish.
And that goes back to being in your belief system and then following that path of least resistance, following those stories, because they interest you and you find that story because it supports another story that you thought you believed.
So it's rabbit hole upon rabbit hole. And so for me, I've always been, that's where I'm pretty firm with, I'm the direct connection to my creation. You're the direct connection to yours. Truth isn't me, what the government tells me is true, and then my truth, or me, what a religion says is true, and then my truth. You are the direct connection to the universe and to your truth. I think it's an important concept for people to understand.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about today?
I think that's about it. I think this was a great first episode. I didn't want to get too much. Did a great introduction for us. I'd love to be on again. I'd like to, talk a little bit more about not only ayahuasca, but how veterans are using psilocybin and mushrooms and functional mushrooms. And then, really how, we didn't even talk about brainwaves today and how, so I think
we have a lot of stuff we could talk about. Yeah.
But I think we should probably do this again. And this was great. I'm glad you came out today. And, we usually play chess here on Sundays and have these long talks. And I think if we could start sharing them with people, they can, maybe help fill in some of the gaps of what we don't know about.
Well, I like what the very last thing you said too, about how it helps military veterans. So they get the ayahuasca journeys will help military veterans get over their PTSD and start having more of a PTG.
Yeah.
Post-traumatic growth.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah. And so September 10th, we're gonna be doing a 9/11 tribute here. Pablo, 1620 Marine, and his father was a firefighter in the 9/11 towers, and so he has some memorabilia. They travel every year, so this year he's gonna be here. We're gonna have a big party for that, so maybe we can broadcast live from there.
Yeah.
Talk to him. We can have a few different guests come on.
That'd be great,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Awesome. Well, great
All right.
speaking with you today.
hey, thank you, Lucius.
Yes, sir. Let's see if we can have a great night, everyone. And thanks for checking it out.